Alright, welcome back to another episode of Bear's Guide to a 5. Today, we're going to talk about boundaries, but not only types of boundaries, but the impact of boundaries. And believe it or not, we've talked a little bit about this already, so it's going to be a pretty easy lesson. At least I think so. So right away, how the heck do we come up with our borders? Like, you look at a map and you're like, who drew those lines? Why'd they draw those lines? Why are some lines straight? Why others aren't? Well, if you've ever had these same questions, probably not, you're going to get the answers today. So there's types of boundaries, and I made a breakdown to kind of help you. So first off, you have physical boundaries, right? Physical boundaries are borders based on something physical. It could be like a mountain range, a river, an ocean. Like, you're going to make the border of your country that place because of that physical feature in the environment. The next type of borders that we have are cultural or consequent. These are borders based on some part of our culture, right? These are the borders that, all borders are made up, but this is one that's not based on the physical environment that we are going to place on a map because it makes sense to us. And then finally, our third type of boundary are relic boundaries. These are borders that do not exist anymore, actually. But the thing is, they still have a cultural impact on or in the state, and we'll go into examples of that. But we're mostly going to focus on our second type of borders, those cultural ones. And this is where it gets a little tough because we can break these cultural borders into two main types. First, we have our ethnic boundaries. These are borders with the ethnicity of people involved, right? We are somehow using or not using ethnicity as a matter to determine where these borders are. And we can break them down into three categories. Yes, there's a lot of breaking down happening. So you have subsequent boundaries where the ethnic lines are taken into account. Like when you draw a border for a country, you're going to draw it with the ethnicities in mind and not put people together who don't like each other. Sometimes you have superimposed boundaries. These are ethnic boundaries that are not taken into account. Think Africa after colonialism, where they just drew their lines wherever they wanted. And then you have antecedent, where no one lives here yet, so ethnicity doesn't matter. But when we draw the lines, the respective ethnicities will fill the country. But back to that second type of cultural boundary. So once again, we know we have cultural boundaries, and we know that our ethnicity can sometimes be involved in creating those borders. But the other time, it's geometric. Yes, math. Borders based on numbers that we made up. Because, guys, we made up longitude and latitude. That's a reflection of our culture. Just as much as religion and language and identifiers of culture make up, culture, so does math, because we came up with it. Isn't that exciting? So what's an example of a physical boundary? A great one, based on the environment, the Pyrenees Mountains. We've talked a lot about the Pyrenees Mountains. They keep coming up. It's the reason why there's an isolated language there, because they have that physical boundary that exists. But when Spain and France are trying to figure out where the border is, it's really easy when there's a mountain range right there, and they're like, you get that side, we get this side. Okay, cool, high five. I'm sure it wasn't like that, but I like to think. And then we have cultural boundaries, right? Those based on an element of culture. So I'm going to spend the next couple minutes breaking down all the different types of cultural boundaries. So first off, our ethnic boundaries. Guys, this is when we take in, I don't want to say take into consideration, but ethnicity is going to be involved. Religion, language, culture practiced, all these things that make up culture. So our first type is subsequent boundary, which takes into the account the ethnic makeup of a place. We have blue dot people, we have red dot people. Hey, let's separate them so they don't fight. Boom. We draw a border. Now, I know there's some outliers here and there, but for the most part, the ethnicities are separated from each other. They have their own states. Everybody is happy, maybe. Or maybe not, because this is what happened to India. Now, I'm going to talk a lot about in class these different types of borders and these examples and who drew them and stuff like that. But fun fact, the UK drew this border too. So after they messed up Africa and just drew borders wherever they wanted, they thought, well, we got to partition India. And I'll talk about the partition of India more, and I'll talk about it as an example of devolution way later because you don't know those words yet. But what they did this time, they were like, okay, we're going to give all the Muslims a country, and we're going to give the Hindus a country. So we're going to draw a line, and they separated them. Well, there were Muslims in India, and there were Hindus in Pakistan, and then they had to migrate across those borders, and it wasn't friendly. So yeah, ethnic conflicts happen. Shatterbelt, so on and so forth. Just talking about, these general impacts of these borders that we draw. But say we don't want to take into account the ethnic makeup. Say we want a superimposed boundary. I just draw a line wherever we want. Boom, done. Deal with it. This kind of looks like, I don't know, as I've mentioned, Africa. Like, it's the best example of superimposed boundaries because literally it happened to an entire continent. And then antecedent boundaries, boundaries drawn before an area is heavily populated. So say consideration the ethnicity and then just draw a line afterward. So then the red dot people have their side, the blue dot people have their side, and then everybody's happy and not going into each other's territory. Now the other side of culture, the geometric boundaries. So a great example of this is the western border between the US and Canada because it's based on a straight line. It's based on latitude and longitude, right? It's a straight line. So you could also consider this an antecedent boundary because people weren't out there yet. But geometric boundaries are a really good one. So one's based on latitude or longitude, or math can be a cultural boundary. And then finally, we have relic boundaries. These are boundaries that no longer exist, but the evidence of them existing still is there in the landscape. The best example of this is the Berlin Wall separating East and West Germany during the Cold War. As you can see in the picture, it wasn't a single wall, it's a bunch of walls, and there were landmines and turrets and sentry towers and landmines. It was awful. But after the Berlin Wall fell, and people from West and East Germany could start talking to each other again, interacting with each other, working as one country again, you would think that everything would get fine over time, but the fact is that we can look at the unemployment rate, and I'm sorry for the pixelation on this, but the fact is the unemployment rate is much higher in East Germany, the place that was controlled by the USSR, compared to West Germany that was free democracy and capitalism and all that. They moved on. They were fine. And in East Germany, they suffered under the USSR. So after that wall fell, they had to catch East Germany up. And still to this day, there's this divide between West and East Germany that can be felt when you're in the country. All right, now, kids ask all the time, what about the ocean? Are there borders in the ocean? Yeah, believe it or not, there is. So the United Nations decided on the UN Maritime Law of the Sea, where borders do extend into the ocean. Now, it is a little complicated because there's technically two borders, so I'll try my best to not confuse you. So from the shore to 12 nautical miles out, countries maintain complete sovereign rights. That means no other country can tell that country what to do with that 12 nautical miles and everything in it. But from the shore to 200 miles out, they maintain exclusive economic rights. That means other countries can go into that area, other countries can sail into that area, they can do things there, but they can't do anything involving the economy. The state is the only entity that can do anything involving that piece of ocean that makes money from it. Now, say there's two countries that are within 12 nautical miles of each other or within 200 nautical miles of each other, then the border is just placed in between. So we have this graphic to help you kind of understand it a little more. As you see, that first 12 miles, that's full sovereignty. That is completely theirs. They have complete control over that area and no other country can tell them what to do. While the 200 miles, the EEZ, the exclusive economic zone, is limited sovereignty. Just really maintaining economic power. So what you need to know today. Boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. I cannot reiterate enough how important it is. I would copy down that flowchart with the arrows and all the different boundaries, and I would take the time to understand each one of them and their examples. And then finally, be able to break down UN Maritime Law. Understand that the 12 nautical miles are sovereign, 200 nautical miles is exclusive economic power, and that you would just split states that are in between. If you have any questions, make sure to write them down so we can address them in class. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Make sure to hit the bell icon so you can be updated when new videos are released. As always, this is Bear's Guide 205. We'll see you next time.